Hello. All right. This time we're going to start on level generation, and it's going to be fun, I think. It's an exciting thing to do because you do like not too much code, and the range of results is quite large. We're doing a very basic version of it, so I've split it into two chunks. We're definitely not going to do all of level generation in one session, but I think we can do the basics, which is geometry, so these obstacles and stuff. Nav points, so that the enemy guards know how to get around all that geometry, and know what points to patrol to. And plinths, like where do they go? There's a bunch of stuff to do with plinths that we still need to do. So things like they're actually meant to be locked off when the alarm goes off. We didn't do that, so you can still take all the stuff afterwards, which is not really the intended design. And like what should be on the plinths and when, that's going to be something we'll do more work on later. So I don't know if we're going to do the plinth locking thing today. Depends how fast the... speaking of which, I'm going to set a timer. How fast we are with the level generation. But the essence of generating levels in a game, especially an indie game, is figuring out what you're not going to change. Like, what are you going to change? Well, as much as possible, but... you need to pick some things that are just going to be set in stone in order to be able to get started at all. So for our purposes, I think we should just keep this border. We can change the size of that border later and fill a bigger space with random stuff. But when I've been mocking up levels, let me switch to... we have 2, don't we? If I switch to level 2, it's 3 blocks. Level 1 is 2 blocks. I've been sort of making just... dividing it kind of into columns. And so one constraint that I know we want is you've got to be able to get from every point to every other point. Every bit of empty space, you should be able to get to every other bit of empty space. Otherwise we've got to have doors and stuff, and we don't want to mess with that. And a real simple way of doing that, if we think of these like as chunks, these two are chunks, and we could have a, if I duplicate that and drag it over, we could have a third chunk. These can vary in all kinds of ways. We could have them like, some like this. We could also have like a chunk that has 2 of these things, and this one could be really wide, and one could just be missing, and all of those things kind of create interesting spaces when you combine them. And combining them is really simple. There's just one, then there's another one, then there's another one. And as long as we don't want to make our level tall, as long as we're happy for it to just be wide, then that's all we need to vary. And even if we do want to make it taller later, I think this is a good starting point. If we know how to fill a wide chunk of space, extrapolating from there to how to fill a tall chunk of space is not too difficult. You can figure out some basic ways to link those up. And like a lot of level generation, it's sort of like you can do less work than you might imagine and still get a result that feels, interesting might be too strong a word, but yeah, just different. Like the mark we're trying to hit is just like, when you go to level 2, do you think, oh, level 2? Or do you think, this is just level 1 again? And it's possible to have level generation that despite actually having mechanical differences, when you look at it, you think, that's just the same level, isn't it? And we don't want that. So we want just enough visual difference to feel new. And that's about it. So I've been calling these like chunks. Let's continue calling them chunks, and let's make some. I think, let's start with the most basic one, which is... I might actually undo a bunch of this stuff and get back to where we were, just because we had a fairly standard chunk size. Don't know if I've ever mentioned you can just undo in Unity. Just taking Control Z there to do that a lot. So, for this to be a chunk, I don't want to have to like place and size this thing in code, because ultimately, level generation, we're going to write some code that places this stuff. What I'm going to do is create... I guess we'll stick with this level geometry system. I'm going to create an empty object here. And I guess we'll start with the middle one. And which one is that? It's this one. So I'm just going to, before we do anything more, our new game object, I'm just going to call this... just call it chunk for now. That one is at 0, 0, 0, and our obstacle is some slightly wonky coordinates. So let's maybe make its x down to 0. Its y is 1, that's fine, because that's the height, so we don't want to mess with that because it's ground level. its z is close to 0, so let's make it 0. And these are all nice whole numbers, so that's probably enough. I almost want to make it a bit wider here, perhaps. Let's try 17. And actually its width is important. What we've got there is that z... This is so confusing because I'm seeing the blue arrow, which normally is z, and here it says z is this way. I think that's the difference between like local and world. This isn't rotated or anything, is it? No, good. Let's just actually change it to check that we know what we're talking about. Yeah, okay. So it's 10 wide. That's quite a nice round number. And we'll separate them by more than 10, obviously, otherwise we don't want them to touch each other. Oh yeah, in case, I mean, that's should have been implicit in what I'm saying, but we leave a gap between each of these columns, and that means that you'll always be able to get between any vertical gaps. So basically, if the gap of this one is at the top and the gap of this one is at the bottom, we don't need any special code to check whether you can get there. Like, there'll always be a completely clear vertical line between each one, and that just makes it really easy to ensure that you can get everywhere. So now that it's whole numbers, I'm just going to drag this obstacle to be a child of the chunk. Child of the chunk sounds like a horror sequel that we won't make. And I might call this like chunk dash middle. So it's a big block in the middle, and we might make one at the bottom, one on the top, that kind of thing. And we're going to make this a prefab, but I think I'll put the plinths in there too. So these plinths, if I just drag them, let's drag them in first. So they're going to be part of the chunk, and that minus 14.49 doesn't look good. I'm going to make that minus 14. 0.5, I guess. I guess it does have to be can't be a whole number. And then, which one's the Uzi one? The fact that it's got an Uzi on it is not relevant. We're going to be using code to decide where what it gets placed on these plinths. But yeah, making the plinths part of the chunk is going to be helpful. So I'm actually, is that centered? I'm not completely sure it is. I guess it has to be, yes, it must be, because it's at, well, if our arena is. Anyway, it looks good enough. So that whole thing is going to be a prefab now. So I'm going to drag it into our assets folder so that we have a prefab like that. And then I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to turn it off for now. And I think what I probably will delete is all the weapons, because I'm already scrolled down. Okay. And probably the antiques, just so that we can kind of see what we're doing. And I guess, we will need to add nav points to that too at some point. So let's do that now, actually. While we're sort of, the idea is to delete all the hand place stuff, put it into these chunks, and then have a chunk for every kind of prefab. Then we'll get rid of all of it, and then we'll use code to spawn them at runtime. I'm just going to start saying at runtime because it's a thing I can't. It's a word I can't word my way around. So runtime means when you're playing the game. I probably explained it before, but it's just awkward to try and avoid that term. It's a bit of a technical one, but it's worth knowing. So yes, do you remember what our nav points are? They're not. Our guards already know what the shape of the level is because we made a navmesh in this navigation tab. I don't know if you remember that. It's actually out of sync now because I moved some stuff, but that's all right. We'll regenerate it later. Nav points are like points of interest. They are the places guards patrol between. So every time a guard wants to patrol, it picks a random nav point to walk to. So we could just put them on the plinths. They could just be every plinth as a point of interest. But it looks a bit better if they are if they're not. Sorry, the nav points are useful because if you don't have nav points and a guard just tries to get to, for example, this antique, he will go like in a line like this, and then he'll like just scrape the corner and he'll go like that. And it just doesn't look very natural for like patrolling guards. Patrolling guards, you kind of want them walking down the middle of the corridor. And nav points, if they're always going to a nav point and the nav points are always kind of in the middle of the corridor, then you're generally all good on that. So we can fine-tune this later, but I'm thinking like a nav point kind of here, and a nav point kind of here, and Why can't I click on that one? This one's the impossible nav point. Should I zoom in on it? I find myself slightly disoriented now. To be honest, it looks like it's already in the right place after all that. All right, and so let me try and find which ones those were. Oh, why isn't that showing in the scene view at all? I can't have selected 5 nav points that aren't on screen. All right, oh, God almighty. It's really making life difficult at the moment. Okay. I thought I would be able to see which ones I have selected, but I apparently can't. I hit the canvas when I do that, so that's awkward. All right, let's put them all under this chunk, and then we're still, if I turn the chunk off so I can see which one I've missed. Well, I know which one I've missed, it's this one. Somehow the UI canvas is blocking me from clicking on this, which is crazy. Come on, it's right there. All right, here we go. And then maybe I can just drag it straight into the disabled chunk. Yeah, I can. So when I turn this back on, they should all appear. Yep, they're all there. Cool. All those ones I just added are not part of the prefab because I did that in the scene. We're in a slightly awkward spot where we're going to be editing a lot. We're going to be editing prefabs in the scene. We kind of need to do it that way because if you edit the prefab, I'll show you. You can see it's not very helpful. Even when you zoom in, it's like, okay, so the wall is there, is it? I can't see the wall, but so it's easier to do it in situ. And now I could right click on all of these and say added game object, apply to prefab. But actually, if I just go to the root prefab and I find the overrides tab here, I can just say apply all. And remember, apply means the changes in the scene get copied to the prefab, like the prefab matches them. Revert means the changes in the scene are thrown away and we go back to what the prefab says. We want to apply. Okay. What I'm going to do is actually just duplicate that whole thing. So select it, Control D. I'll deselect, let me disable this one, enable this one. I don't think we need any of the other stuff. I think we can just delete the obstacles, we can delete all the other nav points, and we can just look at one chunk at a time. And I'll even move the player out of the way. The thing we're almost certainly not going to do today is guards, so there's just going to be one guard, and he's over there, and we'll figure out guard spawning later. These last 2 plinths, I guess I will add one of these in, just because it's nice, it's convenient to have one that's already rotated. That doesn't really matter. And so now this chunk, what do we want to do with this one? Maybe we make this one the... let's actually... oh man, did it let me select... Okay, let's ignore the disabled chunk. The one that we've made, I'm actually going to say, I want to edit this, and it's going to complain a lot because I'm editing an instance of a prefab. Let's unpack the prefab. And it's important there, so... I can't show you now. If I was going to do this again, unpack prefab means this thing I've right-clicked on should no longer be a prefab. Treat it as if I just made a completely new object. Unpack prefab completely would mean all of the children as well get unprefabbed. And we don't want that, because we do want this to be an instance of the Plinth prefab. We do want this to be an instance of the nav one. I just want it to stop complaining when I edit it. And so, this one that we've copied in there, sorry, I'm just going to put my phone on, do not disturb, can go on the side, and I was thinking we get rid of one of these, that one, and maybe just move this whole thing down, again looking for a reasonably round number there. We would then want to get rid of these nav points. Yeah, and that's got like quite a wide open that canvas thing is driving me crazy. Oh, that's where the canvas is. Can I move it? No, I guess its position in world space is kind of a meaningless thing. It's real annoying, isn't it? Like, why does it have to be there? It's because everything starts at 0, 0, isn't it? Oh, I bet there's a clever way to like... I mean, I can hide it, can't I? No. I bet there's a clever way to toggle it in one of these things. can toggle audio, toggle lighting. Right, we don't need to worry about this. These things, I guess, like the nav point just there kind of makes sense. Just so that if someone's pathing through this, they kind of come to roughly the middle of it before they go back out again. That might be it for this chunk. Oh yeah, sorry, this plinth I put there, that looks like a bit of a weird spot. So we can have one down here. I'm going to add loads of plinths because what we're going to do, the way we're going to randomize them, we don't want the plinths to always be in the same place on every level, even if it has the same chunks as another level. So the way I'm going to prevent that is we're going to spawn a load of plinths, then we're going to delete random ones, which is just... The other way to do it is I could put, instead of putting plinths here, I could put like placeholder blobs, and then it could go through and randomly replace some of those placeholder blobs with plinths, and the rest would just be invisible and you'd never see them. That's fine, but I do think it's easier just to have a load and then delete random ones. It's one less object to worry about. You can see it in the level when you're designing these chunks. You see all the possible positions as real, which I think is better than looking at placeholder objects. These nav things are kind of ugly. They're fine. They're kind of necessary for nav because we don't want them to be visible in game. But anytime something is standing in for an invisible thing, for a visible thing, it might as well just be that thing, right? And then yeah, let's dupe this one as well and put it over the other side. I'm increasingly not caring too much about making these super exact. The labels and stuff, we're going to come up with a system for changing those later. Basically, we're going to have a system where we can, like, as we run through these plinths, we can sort of assign it an item, and it's going to get its name from the item, which will... There's a bit of work we need to do before that is possible. But this chunk is looking pretty good. I'm going to call this chunk-bottom, and we'll drag it out as a prefab. And then... what other one do we want? So we've got like a middle island kind of thing. We've got a south island. We could do a north island. In fact, yeah, let's do that because that's real easy. Disable the real one. This new one we created, I'm going to unpack prefab, but not completely. And we could just rotate the entire thing, right? If I just do that, job done. Yeah, I don't see any reason to do anything more fancy than that right now. We'll have to be a bit careful with this because if we were to spawn these two prefabs at the same rotation, if we told them both to spawn at quaternion.identity, have we used that term before? The normal rotation, then they would actually end up being the same. So that is actually worth worrying about now because this is a good thing to remember about Unity in general. It can be tricky. The root, so by root I mean the top thing in this prefab. It's not a prefab yet. I guess I'll make it a prefab now. No, I'm not going to do that. While talking about it, let's look at this one. This root object in a prefab, the thing that everything else is a child of, its transform, all the information about its position, rotation, and scale, instances of the prefab can ignore that. If you change that in the prefab, they will ignore those changes, which sort of makes sense, right? Because all these plinths we've placed, if I edited the plinth prefab and I entered like 1 there, oh god, that was the wrong coordinate to change, 1 there, we don't want every plinth in the world to then go to y = 1, right? That would be annoying. If all our plinths just appeared at one thing. So my opinion is that this system does make sense for position. It does make sense that changing the position of the root object in the prefab doesn't change all of the instances of that prefab to that position. It's a little bit annoying that it doesn't like scale also doesn't happen. If you're ever, especially when we're working with UI, like if you go back to like our menu and stuff, this is, sorry if this is boring, but it is a real like pitfall that you can lose loads of time to. I might reasonably think that the width of a button is something I would want to change in the prefab, right? All our buttons are 297. I might well, and in fact do think that should be 300 instead. If I change that in prefab, it's not going to affect the instances, which sucks because I do want that to be standardized. So that's a good reason that's one of the reasons I'm always creating these empty game objects that have 0, 0, 0 everywhere, and then we parent everything beneath it. But it's so hard to remember. I forget it all the time in my actual job, and it's a pain. So, all that said, that does mean that what I've just done is a bad idea, because when we spawn it, the fact that the prefab is set to be 180, it's going to ignore that, because that's something that's a part of the transform of the root object in a prefab, and it doesn't care. It's going to say instances going to ignore that. So, but there's a really easy way to do it, which is, I keep thinking I can scroll further down. It's bothering me that this is like so, that there's no empty space. I think I'm going to duplicate the whole thing. Bear with me a second. I'm going to rotate this back to 0. I want the root prefab to be 0, 0, 0, everything. Then I'm going to delete all of its contents. It might sound drastic. And copy them from the backup one I made and move them all in there. And so the reason that works, so now we've got what we wanted, which is the top chunk. Its rotation is 0, and but it is at the top, isn't it? It's not at the bottom. Whereas the bottom one looks like that. So the reason that worked is that this one was rotated to 180. I dragged all of its children into the one that isn't rotated. When you do that, Unity figures out how to change all of their little stats so that they will look the same, given that they're now a child of a thing that isn't rotated. So in other words, Unity went through and flipped all of these things and changed their positions and their rotations, which is a nice little thing that it does. It's handy. So that's a good rule to know in general. We used to have a little tips document, didn't we? I wonder if I still have that. I think it's a Google Doc, so I don't want to get into it now. But yeah, that's a good tip. I'll write it in the notes doc for now. When you drag the children of one object to another, it doesn't have to be a prefab, any object, Unity will change all their sizes and positions so that they look the same, despite the parent object having e.g. different rotation or scale, and position actually. It applies to position too. And that's, when you don't want that to happen, you've got to make sure that both the objects are at the same spot. So, these being at 0, 0 is useful for that. Okay, our top chunk is done now. And I'm getting bored of this, so I'm going to leave it there. We'll just have 3 different types for now. Delete this one that I just created as a transitionary thing. And so now, let's make a level generator. Let's literally make a empty game object, which I'm going to click this cog and say reset to put it at 0, 0, 0. I'll call it level generator. I'll add a component to it, which I'm going to call level generator. Create an add. And double click it. By the way, I didn't explain at the time. The reason I called all of these things chunk middle, chunk bottom, and chunk top, instead of calling it middle chunk or bottom chunk or top chunk, is that now when I'm looking for them, I can find them all in the same place in this list. He says mousing over it, but not seeing any of them. Yeah, they're here. I was looking for a blue thing because it is a prefab, but I guess in some cases you get a picture of the prefab, and in some cases you don't. Not really sure why that is. Yeah, why don't I get a picture of... I guess Death Effect is like a... Oh, maybe it's just the ones that don't have anything you can see at all. Yeah. Yeah, they're all there in a nice convenient place once you know where to look. So, level generator. It's created a script now. Double click it. The reason I'm doing it now is I want it to store a list of all those possible chunks. So I'm going to have a public list, pointy brackets, game object, possible chunk prefabs. So all prefabs of all the chunks that are possible to place in the world. And I'm sure we've created lists in the inspector before. It's quite nice. Once you've defined that list in the script, you get this drop-down thing. You don't need to type in a new size there or anything. All we're going to do is... there's one way to do it where you can drag it in. Wow. You drag it through the scene, that's kind of scary. You drag it to here, and it just pops in. But I'm also going to show you a different way, which is I want to select all of these things, and when I do it, oh no, I can't, because now it's changed the inspector to look at them. but you can lock it here. I think we've done that before, haven't we? But yeah, it's useful. That's how I usually do it. So now I can shift select those 3, drag them all into the list. If there was like 12 of these, you definitely want to do it that way rather than dragging each one individually. So there's 3 possible chunks it can place. It is going to place them. Let's see. So it's at 0. Where do we want the leftmost chunk to be? I think X is the dimension. So it's something like that, right? In fact, let's enable one of the others so we can see it for reference. Yeah, something like that. And that is minus 14.5. Let's try minus 15. Let's try minus 16. That's a bit close to the edge, isn't it? All right, so that'll be 15 apart. So when we create them, we want to create one at minus 15, one at 0, one at plus 15, and we could go on forever if we wanted to. It's probably going to make our code simpler if we just move the level generator to minus 15, like wherever we want the level to start. We could also move the whole level so that that is 0, 0, 0, but it doesn't really matter. I think just as long as the level generator is going to generate it starting from where the level generator is. So you put the level generator where you want it to start from. I think that's fine, because if we ever forget that rule, we'll notice it happening, right? We'll see, oh, it's all starting from here. Where's the level generator? So let's go into it. And just on startup, it's going to create this level. So how does it create the level? I want it to, let's see, we want it to do it 3 times. We know that this level is going to be 3 wide. For now, we'll just tell it how many chunks to make. In future, if we want to make it more flexible, we can have like a size it's got to fill, and it figures out how many chunks it needs for that. But for now, we're just going to do a loop of 3. We used this last time for int I equals 0, I less than, in this case, just 3, I plus plus. We want to instantiate something. We want to instantiate some kind of chunk, but we don't know which chunk we want to use yet, so we probably want to put something before this. Let's just not leave that half finished, because Visual Studio hates me doing that. So what we want to do is get a random chunk type. So how could we do that? Well, we can access chunk types by doing that and then something in those brackets, like 3 or 2 or 1. We want a random number. We want a random number that is between, we can get a random number with random.range. Not random range, just range, right? Yeah. Put things in this bracket. Because I know it's 3, I could write 0, 2, or 0, 3. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. But obviously we don't want to... in fact, that's confusing, because we're going to do it 3 times. We only have 3 types. We're going to change that, though. In fact, I might just do this now. I'm just going to duplicate one of those elements. So we have 4 in this list now. I don't want you to get confused over the fact we're creating 3 of them and there are 3 of them. Those are unrelated numbers. So there aren't 3 of them. There are 4. We'll make them different later. There are 4 different possible types of chunks, and if we want to pick a random one, we need a number between 0 and... We want 0, 1, 2, or 3. All of which is to say, 0 is definitely always going to be the minimum number. What is the maximum number going to be as this list gets bigger or smaller in size? It's going to be the count of how many things are in that list. So all of that is to say a random chunk type. And in fact, we're going to store that in a variable. So game object, I'll go over this again in a sec, but let's define a new game object variable called random chunk type equals possible chunk prefabs. And which one do we want? We want random, we want this index. And just to make it really clear what we're doing here, I'm actually going to do that separately, and we'll define an integer random chunk index equals that, and then the one we want is this. I think it looks clearer to do that, but later on we're going to need to do this a lot, picking a random element for a list, so I'm actually going to write a function that does it, I think, that will make our code more readable, but it's important to understand the steps that we go through to get it, because it's useful to do that. So yeah, we look for pick a random point in the list, then go get the chunk that's at that point in the list, and now we want to instantiate it. That's what we were trying to do in the first place, random chunk type. And we want to instantiate it at our transform. Well, let's just write this for now. Quaternion.identity. So this is, we're spawning it at our location, and the quaternion identity. I'm just trying to remember if I've ever explained what that is. Feels like the kind of thing that would have come up. No, this is our first time writing it. Okay, so I could avoid using that complicated term, but I'm going to explain it because it is one that comes up a lot. It's when you want to spawn something and just face, let's go back to the inspector, 0, 0, 0. We actually know, we have a special word for that, right? It's vector.0. Remember vector3.0? We've used that before. That just means 0, 0, 0. Well, quaternion.identity is the special name for rotation 0, 0, 0. It's anyone who really knows what a quaternion is raising their eyebrow right now, like, it's not quite that. It's a little bit different, but you don't need to know what the difference is. Because quaternions are secretly 4 numbers, not 3, but Unity shows a rotation as 3, and don't worry about it. The point is, quaternion identity is basically like vector 3.0. It's 0, 0, 0. It's the normal rotation. And so that is where our flipped chunk would have slipped up, is we're saying spawn it at 0, 0, 0, 0, and the fact that it has a minus 180 in the prefab wouldn't count, and it would end up the same way up as the other one. So this is pretty good, but it's not quite right, is it? Because it's going to spawn them all at the same spot. How do we get their position to be different? Let's, again, do this as an extra step, just to be really clear about what we're doing. Spawn position. Equals, we're going to start from our transform.position, the level generator, wherever we put that, plus I'm going to make a new vector 3, and it's the x coordinate we want to vary, the first one. Vector 3 is x, y, z. X is the one where we want to start at this and then go along. The first one should be at 0, the next one should be at 15, the next one should be at 30. So what is that? In terms of I, the first one is 0, so that will be 0. The second one, we want it to be at 15. So if we do I times 15, 0, 0, then I'll just go through it again and show you that that would be correct. So the first one, I is 0. We start at 0 for there. So 0 times 15 is 0. The next time, I will be 1. 1 times 15 is 15. That's what we wanted for the second one. The third time we do it, I is 2. 2 times 15 is 30. That's also what we wanted. And why not? Let's just illustrate that too. So first, this would be... Oh yeah, no, I won't illustrate in the inspector because, of course, these values will be different because they're relative to the level generator. So I can't visually show you that, but hopefully it made sense. That should be everything, I think. Oh no, there's one more thing I want to do. Oh well, let's run this and I'll show you what a potential problem with it is and why I want to change it a bit, just in a really simple way. Once it's letting me click on things, I'll disable these two, so our level's nice and empty. Then we'll play it, and we should see it. Ooh, no. Let me see. What did we get? Did we end up with 3 chunks and they're all? Yeah, we've got 3 chunks and all in the same spot. So I've done something wrong. What did I do wrong? I know what I did wrong. I created this spawn position variable, then I didn't actually use it. I left that as transform position at the place we spawn it. Okay, that's an easy fix. Apparently I've got unsaved changes in my notes, so I'm going to save them. And now I want to play. Okay, cool. So now we do indeed have 3 chunks, and some of them are different, some of them are the same. And if I just go to new game, does that work? Yeah, cool. I get a different level. New game, new game, new game. Random levels. We're most of the way there. I kind of like this one, actually. It's very austere. So this is actually pretty good. I'll show you what the change I was going to make, because it may still be worth making. If you didn't want that to have 3 that are all the same, and especially in like a bigger level, if we're going to have 8 of these, if the first 4 of them are the same one, that looks really weird. So one way we can do that, we can avoid that is to remove the one we just picked. So the list of possible chunk prefabs, we want to remove the random chunk type. So be a bit careful with this. The thing we want to remove, this is the list of possible chunk prefabs. In this process, we selected a chunk prefab, a particular one. Then we instantiated it. We made a copy of it. Now, the thing we want to remove from this list is the prefab, not the instance and not the index, but the prefab. So we can't use that template again. And that way, each one will be different. Of course, it won't immediately be different because, you know what I'm going to do real quick is let's make a new prefab. We already have these somewhere in the list. I'm going to duplicate this one. If it'll let me disable the old one. And I'm just going to, first of all, unpack it. Don't want to make any changes to the original. I'm just going to delete the central thing. And now we'll just call this chunk empty. And that'll make a visually different one. And now I need to go back to the level generator. And I didn't want these two dupes to be in there, because if I'm trying to show you how this won't duplicate anything, having duplicate entries really defeats the point of that. So I put the empty one in there. Oh yeah, so that's another thing you can do, is you can drag an element from here onto one here, and it will replace it. If I'd wanted to add it, I would drag it up to the top, and then that'll add it to the end of the list. So now we should see no repeated chunks. Every chunk should be different in the level. Yep, that's a top, an empty, and a bottom. That's a bottom, a top, and an empty. No middle so far. A middle! Okay, so the empty one definitely makes a big difference. That gives it a very different feel. Maybe a bit too random with the empty one, but we can change our minds about these chunks later. Yeah, so we are doing pretty well on these. That I really like. That's the kind of thing I want the empty one to do. We could even add a special rule: the empty one can't go at the start or the end, because I think that's when it looks weird. Or more probably, we could make it like a small island or something, and it would probably feel more logical. Yeah, we've got a random level generator. Just want to check. Oh yeah, there's a big thing we still need to do. We haven't really seen it go as wrong as it could go yet, but look at this navmesh. This is what the AI thinks the level looks like with all the blue stuff. It thinks it can't go anywhere in this area. It thinks it can go through here, so I don't know if we'll see it do that. In fact, can't I? Well, let's watch. Yeah, he's already inside the wall now. You can see that in the game. Yeah, that's not what we want, is it? So the question arises: how do you? The way we fixed this nav mesh was, let's pretend we've got this, we've got some level going on. If we'd hand designed this and we wanted to fix the nav mesh, we go to the navigation tab, we go to bake, and we click bake down here, and it fixes it all. Cool. But when the game's running, how do we do that? Well, there is a way to do that, but actually we don't need to, because what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to clear everything out of the way, then bake it. And it's occurring to me that I didn't make these obstacles a prefab, which was a shame, but actually it doesn't really matter because we don't have a huge number of them. I'll make it a prefab for future reference, but let's turn on one of these chunks. All we need to do to make the nav mesh realize this is an obstacle is to add a component to it called nav mesh obstacle, and then you just got to check this carve box, which means it's going to carve a chunk out of the nav mesh. The nav mesh being this map of where everything goes. In fact, because I click carve, it's happened right away. Look at that! I can just show you that it works in real time. So now wherever we put that, it's going to correctly affect the nav mesh thing. Because I shouldn't have moved that, because this actually is. Oh no, this won't be used. It's fine, but I will revert it anyway. So I'm going to. We'll just call this obstacle, and I'm going to drag it into. Children or a prefab instance cannot be deleted. Oh, this is really annoying. I've had this before. it's annoying because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to delete, move the child of the prefab instance. It's saying you can't delete it, you can't move it, and you can't reorder components. I'm not trying to do any of those things. I'm trying to save it as a prefab. I will just have to... I mean, it raises a good point, which is I shouldn't have modified this in the instance because this added component. I want that to apply to the prefab chunk. Now I'm going to open the chunk prefab, and this obstacle that I created, I will do changes in here. And then drag obstacle down so the obstacle itself is also a prefab. So that's not going to update all the other chunks. All the other chunks still have just a random blob in there that it won't get these changes. But just for future reference, we've got an obstacle now we drag in that has this navmesh obstacle component on it that we need. So like what Unity is trying to stop you from doing is I can't drag this to here. That's the message you get for doing that. And because you're dragging, even though you're trying to put it there, it thinks you're trying to remove it or delete it or reorder it. You're not trying to do any of those things. You're trying to save a new prefab, but can't do it from there. And the way around is you just open the prefab and do it from there like I just did. So these ones, I could, for the other chunks, I guess let's stop looking at this list and let's edit the prefabs here so that we don't get confused. For each of these, I could drag that obstacle in. In fact, I will. Let's do it. Drag the obstacle in, and then because I just want an instance of the obstacle prefab to match this, so I'm just going to go cog, copy component, and then down on my obstacle, cog, paste component values. And if I'd zoomed in, that would have been more dramatic. We would have seen it go and match it, and then I'll just delete the old one. So now it looks all the same, but our obstacle has an obstacle component on it. And if we ever want to make future changes to the obstacles, it will propagate to all these other chunks. So that was chunk bottom. Let's do chunk empty. No work to do here. Chunk middle is the one we started with, so that's already got its obstacle is already in blue because it's already a prefab. And then chunk top is the last one. So let's drag in the obstacle prefab to it. Let's go to the existing chunk of stuff. Got to stop using the word chunk for everything. And so you can see like this one is off to the side and this one is in the correct position. We copy the component, go down to this one, and paste component values. And now I can delete the old one and it all looks the same. So that should mean that in-game... oh wait, hang on. I forgot to disable one of the chunks, it looks like. That does actually look right, but there should not have been a chunk already existing. It should be disabled. So we'll play, and then we'll look at... hopefully we don't see the guard do anything weird. He's going into a corner, but he's not going to walk through the walls, I don't think. You're not going to walk through the walls, are you? No. And then if we go to navigation and switch to the scene view, we should see that the nav mesh is all correct. Yeah. And then let's go to new game, get a different layout. Let's get a more complicated one. And yay, nav mesh is perfect. So that's easy. I assume that there is some cost to just making everything an obstacle. Like, we could just put a component on every damn thing in our world. And in fact, at a game of our scale, I'm sure we could do that and it would have no problems at all. There must be some advantage to baking your nav mesh ahead of time. I assume it saves performance. So if you're making a very complicated game with thousands of obstacles, and they were all static like ours aren't going to move at runtime, so we don't actually need them to be like dynamic things. It's just that we're going to create them at runtime. If we had loads and loads of those and we really cared about performance, then it would probably make more sense to place them all and then rebake the nav mesh in code. You can do that. We do that for tactical breach wizards. But the code is just not as simple as what we just did. What we just did is very nice and simple, and it works even if you want to move those things during the game, so it's a useful thing to know about. That's about it. So I think we're coming up on 45 minutes. We are. I think we've got time to fix the plinths, because the plinths aren't really... there's nothing in our levels anymore. I feel like we should fix that. There's a lot of labels claiming there's things on these plinths, but there is nothing on the plinths. And we should put things on the plinths. So what I want to do is right. So what does our plinth prefab look like right now? Let's open the prefab. It's got this alarm switch on it that changes the light. It doesn't have any behavior of its own. I think we want to give it one. So I'm going to make a plinth script, because plinths are they become quite important to our game now. Everything you can pick up is going to be on a plinth, and the plinths now, change their look with the alarm. And what I want to be able to do when I generate a level, I don't just want to place... Well, first of all, I want to know where the plinths are, because that's where I want to put my objects. And when I place an object on a plinth, I want the plinth to know about that object. I want it to know what I've given it, because the plinth has a label on it, and I want that label to reflect what is on the plinth. Because those labels were a great addition. They really changed the game, because none of our models are very clear what they are, and just having the text there that tells you what it is completely changes your perception of it. Of just know it. You have a huge amount of clarity over where things are and what the important bits of the environment are. So we've got to have that. We've got to keep that feature, even though our levels are now dynamically generated, so we can't hand write them and hand place them. So I want when I'm spawning items, what I want to be able to do is pick a plinth to put it on, and then I want to tell the plinth, this is your item. So we need a public void assign item, I think, and we'll pass in a game object item. And we want the plinth to store it in some way, so we could do something like game object, like we could give the plinth its own variable for storing a game object that is my item. But actually, I think we'll hit a problem if we do that, because they're all objects. The actual name of the object is going to be Uzi variant, and sure, we could rename so we could have that name printed on the label. We could have it say Uzi variant. That's fine. You get a game object, you can access its name. I'll write this now. My item dot name. It already has a name variable. That variable is whatever you set in the inspector. And Uzi variant is bad. We could rename it to just Uzi, but actually when that gets instantiated at runtime, using all my technical terms now, it's going to be called something like clone Uzi variant in brackets, or some really technical name like that. And you don't want that printed on a label, obviously. You almost never want to go by the name of a game object. It's useful for debug purposes to print out what thing is crashing right now, but the player should never really see those names, because you're probably going to change them, like that middle chunk thingy. That was just a convenience for getting them right alphabetical order. I might change my name about what to call these things. I might change my name about what weapon should be called in my hierarchy for convenience. So yeah, we need to access a name. And so we could have it look for a weapon component and name that, but these plinths also have antiques on them, right? So okay, we could do an if then, and if it has an antique component, we look for some field on there, and if it has a weapon component, we look for some field on there. We don't really want that. We could do something really stupid where we make antiques and weapons like children of some parent class, and the parent class has a name variable. That also, I think, is too complicated. We already have a solution just waiting in the wings for us, which is that weapons and antiques and anything else we ever want to put on a plinth will be usable. We already have a usable component on all of those things. So I think we should give that a name. So if we edit the usable, it will just be as simple as a public string display name. I recommend using that variable name. We use it all over the place in Breach Wizards, and having a separate display name to the actual object's name is really, really useful, and it'll serve you well. So if every usable has a display name, then we can just type those in on the prefab. That will be the same for every instance of that prefab, and because everything that can be on a plinth is usable, we can get the name from there. So what did I just do that to? This is an Uzi. I'll just type the word Uzi into its display name. And that is, you might notice that's gone bold. It's coming up as an override. That's okay. It's not an override of the Uzi variant, because I am editing. Oh God, am I? Yes, I am. I am editing the Uzi variant, but it's an override from the original weapon prefab, which you might have forgotten this because it's a long time ago. But we made a single weapon prefab, and then every individual weapon type is a variant of that. And then in the game, the weapons you pick up are going to be instances of the variant. Sorry that that's complicated, but it is worth spelling out just to refresh you, because it's a long time ago. So, all of which is to say, when we assign an item to the plinth, I think it's actually going to store a usable rather than the game object. You know me, I always like to store a reference to a component rather than to the whole game object, because usually the component is what you want to do something with. And if you do need to access the game object, you can get to it from there really easily, more easily than you can get to the component from the game object. So let's call it my usable. So when someone assigns us a game object, they will give us a game object. I don't want them to have to figure out what part of the game object we're interested in. As always with code, this class should know about how it works. Another class shouldn't need to know how this class works. It's just like, look, I got a damn it, I gotta bleep that. I've got an Uzi. Here it is, I'm handing it to you, and then the plinth goes in and looks, okay, this must be a usable item. Where's its usable component? Okay, I found the usable component. Here's its name. We'll put that on our label. So let's do that now. My usable equals item.getComponent, pointy brackets, usable. And the next thing I want to do is set the label to be that name. So I need a reference to my own label. That's going to have to be a public text mesh pro. Going to hit Control J to get the autocomplete. That thing. My label. And once we've been told what our item is, we'll do my label.text equals my usable.displayname, that variable we just created. So you give us an object, we figure out where its usable component is, and once we find it, we set our label to display that name. Right away, we want to get back to that Plinth prefab. Where is it? Here it is. Because it needs a reference to its label. And I want to see this, so let's just see in view. That's its label. Let's drag that text component over to here. That is the text we're looking at. If I disable that, you'll see it disappear. And in fact, since we're now having that set by code, I'm going to change the placeholder text, because if a shotgun went on here, it might look like it's working when it's not. So I'll just put unset. Not set. Name not set. Just to be real obvious that it's an error, that shouldn't be happening. And now I'm not going to go through and name everything just yet. We've still got to do some more hooking up here, haven't we? Because no one's assigning any items to plinths yet. So level generator. First of all, I want it to have a list of things it can assign to plinths. So public list game object again. Things to put on plinths. And then we want to loop through all the plinths as well. So we need a list of the plinths. Let's go to references. And I'm going to go through this at a fair old rate, because hopefully you're really familiar with this pattern now that we keep doing. We define a list of plinths. We call it plinths, and it's a new list of plinths. Real simple. And then in the plinth class itself, in order to ensure that every plinth is always on the list and is always taken off the list, we do onEnable references.plinths.add this. Put us on the plinths list when we're enabled. Enabled is going to happen on when we're created. It's going to happen when we're turned on or off. All right. And then on disable references.plinths.remove this. So every plinth will be on a list, and the level generator will be able to access that. It's also got a list of things it wants to put on plinths. So we will do. We'll loop through every plinth, right? We'll go for each plinth in. You're going to get sick of this word. References.plinths. It's going to be one of those things where you say it too much and then it just sounds completely bizarre. It's quite a weird word to begin with. Let's find a random item from the list of of things to put on plinths. So this was some code where we picked a random item from a list. Now it's going to be random thing index, and we're going to pick it from the things to put on plinths list. It's a random number between 0 and the number of things that are in that list. And the game object random thing will be taken from the things to put on plinths list, and it's going to be at the random thing index. And then we'll instantiate that. Yes, we will instantiate it. So instantiate the random thing. I don't actually care where it goes. So in fact, I think we can just not specify where it goes. It can just be created like that. But we do need to store a reference to it because game object, come on, autocomplete. New thing equals instantiate random thing. Probably should have called this random thing type, actually. Can I rename it? Random thing, oh come on. Random thing type. And then we instantiate a copy of that random type. And we then, with this plinth that we have access to, we want to assign item, new thing, the thing we just created. And then the plinth is going to go and find its usable component, and we also want to, things to put on plinths, let's take out the thing that we just added. Like before, we want to, we don't want to keep adding copies of the same thing to every plinth. So let's take it out of the list, random thing type. I'm going to make a real small collection here. I shouldn't have started that with a capital letter, because variables generally don't have that. Okay, so this says pick a random type of thing we haven't placed yet. Instantiate one of those, and then assign it to this plinth. And I can put a comment up here that says for each plinth, but honestly our code basically says that. For each plinth in all the plinths. Plinth. Alright, I think that is going to get all the labels, yeah, let's just start the game because it's going to go wrong in two different ways. But I'm impatient to run the game again, and also I'm aware I'm running high on time, and we've got a crash. Which thing? Okay, we ran out of. Oh, did we? Oh, you know what's happening? Yes, this. There's nothing in the list yet. I forgot to actually set up the list. So, things to put on plinths. What kinds of things do we want on plinths? Let's put an Uzi variant in there. Let's put a shotgun variant in there. Let's put the antique in there. Let's put the railgun in there. And then we could, and I think I will just for now, just drag antique to it a bunch more times. Like a list doesn't have to be unique elements. It can be a bunch of different things. And so now when it's placed one antique, that doesn't mean it won't place another antique. It can find it again in the list. Still a crash. Which thing is not set to an instance? Oh, my label. Didn't we set that up? I thought we did set that up. I was pretty sure we did set that up. Let me check. Plinth, open, text. That is the text. It's got a reference to it. So maybe it doesn't mean the plinth bit. Maybe it means the usable bit. But that would be crazy, wouldn't it? What I'm going to do is, what might be happening is that whatever item we were passed in doesn't have a usable component. I think they all do, but because there's no way the label thing can be wrong, right? My label is definitely correct. My usable was just set right here, so it could only go wrong if it doesn't have a usable component. So let me just check that. If my usable is null after we've done that, and otherwise we didn't find a usable component, then I'm going to, don't know if we've done this before, debug log error. This is going to tell the game to crash and tell us, what the item was. Item.name. You don't need to write this because I'm going to find out what the bug is, but just worth knowing, just being familiar with this, that you can do this. Didn't have a usable. Let's see if that reveals what's going on here. I had this error in practice, but in my case it was I'd forgotten to set the text label. And this time I haven't done that, but I'm still getting the error. Railgun beam, I dragged the wrong thing in. Okay. Instead of the railgun variant, I dragged the railgun beam in. Sorry, just in case you didn't see that, railgun beam. That doesn't have a usable, nor should it. So let's go find the real railgun. Railgun, so it must be this one. Yeah, railgun variant. All right, cool. So that was a good little bit of debugging. We got to the bottom of that real fast. It's crashed again. Oh, they had a range thing again. So the first time it happened, it was because our code doesn't account for the possibility that that list could be 0 items long. It's on line 29. This is the bit I'm looking for here. Level generator line 29. Level generator line 29. Excuse me, that's not level generator. This is. Things to put on plinths. Random thing index. Okay, yes. Okay, this does make sense. All right. So we don't need to. The first time I hit that crash, I didn't change anything because I don't need this code to account for a 0 length list. If we fail to set up a list of things to put on plinths, we've done something wrong. The code's not the problem, it's that we failed to set up the list. But it is possible that there are so many plinths that since we're removing these item types, then we would run out of things to put on them. So for now, probably the easiest fix to that, I mean, we could stop putting things on plinths, but I think for now I'll just remove that remove. We won't remove the type after we've placed a thing of that type. So pick a random thing, not that we haven't placed yet, just any random thing, doesn't matter. So we might get a lot of repetition, but it's fine. We'll fix that later because we're going to do something about how many plinths we get. There's going to be a lot of plinths in our feature. And I really want to see this working now. I'm invested. Okay. Interesting. Yes. So this is the lack of names. My placeholder text obviously doesn't show because if something doesn't have a name, it's not that it fails to assign it, it's that it assigns it, but it's blank. So let's fix that problem first. This is not really a bug, it's just we need to go through and actually give things names. What I was expecting to see is that like one of them would have a name, but I guess only the Uzi does. So on our antique, let's call this antique. I'm being a bit fast and loose here and just clicking them in the project view and then typing from here. I am editing the prefab here, but if you wanted to be extra careful, you could open it up here or double click it. I should be double clicking it, shouldn't I? That makes more sense. Shotgun. Scroll down to the usable, type in shotgun. And that's probably it, isn't it? Shotgun, railgun, Uzi, antique. Those are the 4 kinds of things in the universe. I didn't know about anything else. Hooray! We've got labels for everything. Alright, cool. They should be in capitals really, but I am not going to change that yet because we've got a big problem, which is like, where are they? They're all over the place. I would expect... Oh no, I think they're all in the same spot maybe. Because we created them wherever we wanted. We didn't care where we created them. And that's right, we don't want to care where we create them because when we assign them to a plinth, I want the plinth to care about where it creates it. And so the plinth can, when it gets given this item, we might as well change. I guess we can do it here. So we could do myUsable.transform.position equals our transform.position. Let's see how that looks. Oh, and I might also say myUsable transform rotation. Come on. Equals transform rotation. So it's going to face our same way too. I suspect they'll be sort of clipping into the floor, maybe clipping into the wall a little bit, and we can fix that with a custom sort of placeholder for them. So that's perfect for antiques. Actually, that's kind of fine. I'm going to get killed while this is happening. Okay, no, the railgun is in the floor. That's not great. Has he not seen me yet? Or maybe he wasn't coming the way I thought. Yeah, the weapons are in the floor. That's not so good. Let's... what I want to do is just open up the Plinth prefab, and then we'll create, just in here, an empty game object. Spot for item. I'm avoiding using the word position for item because it has both position and facing. And so what we actually found is they were sticking out too far, weren't they? So let's put it further back. Should have a negative Z. And that's probably too high. So this might look weird for the antiques, but it'll look better for the guns. And in the Plinth code, we are going to create a public... I'm going to create a public transform for spot for item. And so transform rather than position, because if we could put vector 3 there and then set the transform position to that. I'm using a whole transform that includes rotation and position, and it's easier to assign it in the inspector, which I'll do right now. Plinth over here has spot for item, and we drag it in there, and yeah, that's just dragging it. If that was a vector 3, I would have to actually go and type in these 3 values into it, or copy and paste. Can you do that? I'm not sure. Anyway, transform's easier, and we want 2 different things anyway. We want rotation as well as position. So now, instead of going by our own transform, we will do spot for item .transform .position and spot for item .transform .rotation, and that ought to be pretty much it. It's annoying, like generating big chunks of levels real fast is a lot of fun, and then just getting the labels to reflect what's on the plinth is like the other half of the work, which feels ridiculous. But that is game development. That is bizarrely accurate to what it is like. Okay, that looks fine. The weapons are visible. The antiques do look weird. We might need to figure that out later. But it's basically working. And let's celebrate by setting off the alarm. And I meant to. I can't believe that strategy didn't work. All right, that's enough for this time. We will next time. I'm certainly going to stop that noise. Next time we will. I put down advanced generate levels. That would mean that we figure out how many enemies are going to be in the level and where to put them, how many enemy spawners there should be, and configs. That's my term for just like we should be able to set like details about what we want from a level, then go and set another set of details for what the other level should be like. What should level 2 be like? And that way the game can progress. It can have a difficulty curve, and it can start to feel more like a game.